we're diving into the most shocking deaths caused by social media stunts, from a seamstress in Lagos whose aunt choked while prank calls overwhelmed emergency lines, to a van driver in Italy who crashed after hitting fake road hazards set up by filming teenagers. It was June 28, 2014, in Bristol, England. In one garden, a few neighbors laughed as they arranged decorations under a sagging gazebo. Nothing looked dangerous, just bunting, balloons, and an oversized plastic archway borrowed from a wedding hire company. Helen Archer, 67, was sitting nearby on a folding chair with a cardigan over her shoulders. She had taught primary school for 3 decades and was known locally for her patience and her soft voice that still carried a trace of the classroom. Since her husband's death 2 years earlier, she'd kept herself busy tending flowers and hosting small neighborhood teas. When the volunteer group asked to use her garden for a surprise anniversary celebration, she agreed without hesitation. She liked company. Despite her arthritis and shortness of breath, she refused help setting up, insisting she could at least supervise. Her physical frailty wasn't new, but her willingness to stay involved made her feel useful again. The neighborhood group, a few retired couples and a pair of younger volunteers, planned the event for a neighbor's 40th wedding anniversary. Someone suggested adding a fun surprise moment, a confetti cannon under the archway, for when the guests of honor walked in. The borrowed arch, intended for indoor use, stood nearly 8 feet high with weighted feet that weren't properly secured on the uneven flagstones. Helen watched them assemble it, occasionally smiling but never realizing how unstable it looked from the side. The prankster, a man in his 50s, wanted the arch to appear larger, so he added 2 helium columns and plastic panels tied with thin garden wire. By late afternoon, everything was ready. Guests began filtering in, bringing trays of food and bottles of cider. Helen sat just a few feet from the arch, waving and greeting people as they entered the garden. The man with the confetti cannon positioned himself behind a bush, aiming the launcher towards the path. The idea was to fire as the couple arrived, catching the moment on video. Several people had their phones out, laughing about how surprised the guests would be. Nobody noticed that one side of the arch had started to lean forward slightly under the weight of the decorations. When the guests of honor stepped through the gate, the man fired the cannon. The compressed air burst was louder than expected. A sharp, metallic, followed by a bright plume of shredded paper and helium balloons shooting upward. Startled, a few people screamed, but laughter followed quickly. Then the left leg of the arch jerked. Witnesses later described a slow, wavering motion before the entire structure tilted forward. Helen tried to stand, but her chair caught on the paving. The arch collapsed in one motion, the aluminum frame striking her across the chest and shoulder. Chaos ensued, people shouting, chairs clattering, the camera jerking toward the ground. Several neighbors rushed to lift the frame, but the tangle of pipes and balloons made it difficult. Helen's hands moved briefly, then went still. A neighbor called 999, while another attempted to free her breathing space. When paramedics arrived, they cut away the arch and began resuscitation. She was taken to Southmead Hospital, where doctors treated multiple rib fractures, internal bleeding, and cardiac arrest. But she was pronounced dead the next day. The coroner's inquest later found that the arch had not been anchored and had been overloaded with decorations. Footage from a nearby community center's CCTV and several mobile phones confirmed that no stabilizing weights or ties were used. The confetti launcher's discharge likely triggered the collapse. In the weeks that followed, the community fractured. Some blamed the man who fired the cannon. Others blamed the loose oversight of the event. Helen's granddaughter held a quiet memorial in the same garden, planting flowers beneath the spot where the arch had stood. A brief safety bulletin was circulated by the council to remind residents that even private gatherings must comply with event safety standards. The neighborhood group that had organized the party dissolved quietly, its members too ashamed to meet again. It was March 22nd, 2018, in a crowded residential compound in Lagos, Nigeria. On that day, a series of thoughtless prank calls had already been routed through the local emergency hotline, overwhelming the dispatchers and delaying response times. No one anticipated that one of these calls would indirectly cost a life in the very compound where chaos had been sown. Amaka Ease, 34, was a skilled seamstress who ran a small, home-based tailoring business. She lived with 3 children and her elderly aunt, who suffered from mobility and swallowing difficulties. Amaka had a meticulous nature, both in her work and her household, and was deeply protective of her family. She occasionally joked with neighbors and friends, but had a history of underestimating minor risks, often believing her presence could manage any sudden danger at home. Her days were long, alternating between sewing, errands, and caring for her household, and she occasionally recorded short instructional videos for local tailoring networks, seeking modest sponsorship from a regional fabric supplier. Her living environment was cramped and chaotic, narrow hallways, stacked furniture, and limited exits. Emergency services had always been slow in this part of Lagos, but Amaka relied on knowing the fastest routes to the street and kept basic first aid supplies close. She sometimes dismissed minor safety protocols, such as ensuring a second adult was present when cooking or lifting heavy objects, assuming she could handle sudden emergencies. The combination of her proactive nature and overconfidence in personal vigilance made her vulnerable in situations that demanded outside help. That afternoon, Amaka's aunt began to choke on a small piece of food. Amaka immediately began backblows while shouting for assistance. A neighbor tried both the 767 and 112 emergency lines, but one rang endlessly and the other returned a network error. Amaka continued trying to clear the airway while moving furniture to make space for intervention. Nearby, a local courier on a delivery route noticed the commotion. He sprinted to the junction to flag down passing police and patrol cars, but every unit was tied up responding to prank calls or minor false alarms. He saw Amaka's frantic movements, her face pale and strained, hands repeatedly slapping the aunt's back, while neighbors banged on doors and yelled for immediate help. Chaos and helplessness were evident. Time slowed, yet no professional assistance arrived. By the time an ambulance arrived nearly 30 minutes later, the aunt had already lost consciousness. Paramedics administered resuscitation, performing CPR and oxygen therapy, but the prolonged delay had caused irreversible hypoxia. Investigators later reviewed the dispatcher's logs, noting dozens of prank calls in the preceding 48 hours, many originating from the same youth group. Investigators traced many of those prank calls to a group of secondary school students using shared SIM cards at a local youth center. The cumulative effect of these calls had shifted priority and contributed to the fatal delay. The incident left neighbors shaken. Community meetings quickly turned to anger and reflection, recognizing how a harmless prank escalated into tragedy. The youth center responsible for several offenders implemented mandatory first aid and public safety workshops for the pranksters, ensuring they understood the real-world consequences of their actions. Telecom authorities also instituted stricter call screening and heavier penalties for serial prank callers. It was October 14th, 2016, in Queens, New York. In the apartment block on 37th Avenue, most tenants were winding down for the night. Down the hall from the second-floor landing, an old man sat alone in his living room, watching sports reruns. Outside his door, 2 younger men whispered, holding their phones out to record. Roberto Bert Morales was 58, a retired subway maintenance worker. He'd spent 30 years under fluorescent tunnels before taking early retirement after a mild heart attack. He lived quietly, collected his pension, and spent evenings at the local bar watching games with a few old co-workers. He had a weak heart and some shortness of breath, but doctors said with medication and less stress, he could live comfortably for years. He kept his small apartment in perfect order, ashtray cleaned, remote on the table, slippers lined by the sofa. The 2 men who called themselves his buddies were a decade younger, part of a newer crowd that hung around the bar. They'd filmed small pranks before, fake lottery wins, surprise scares, minor nonsense meant for laughs online. Bert tolerated them, sometimes laughed along. The idea for the fake break-in came up during a late evening argument about who could handle being robbed. Someone joked that Bert would probably drop dead from shock. The comment turned into a dare. They decided to sneak into his hallway and stage a mock burglary while recording his reaction. It was cruel, but they told themselves it would just be noise, a few laughs, and then an apology. By 10:40 p.m., the 2 men were outside Bert's apartment, hoods up, half drunk. One carried a mask, The other had a crowbar. They whispered and giggled, testing how loud they could bang on the wall before anyone noticed. The hallway camera later showed them pacing, building up nerve. They waited until a TV ad break echoed faintly through the door, then started the act. 3 hard bangs, 1 shout, the sound of the crowbar slamming against the door frame. Inside, Bert was likely confused and frightened. He wasn't expecting visitors. His building had been robbed years earlier, and the memory had probably left him cautious. He looked through the peephole but saw only movement, dark clothing, and the flash of metal. His pulse rose sharply. When another crash hit the door, he opened it halfway, instinctively bracing himself. The 2 masked figures lunged forward, shouting. The building's camera recorded the moment clearly. Bert froze, his right hand clutching his chest. His knees buckled, and he fell backward into the hallway, knocking over a folding chair. The 2 men stopped instantly. A neighbor across the hall opened her door after hearing the crash. She found Bert on the floor, gasping shallowly. The pranksters panicked. One ran for the stairs while the other knelt beside him, trying to shake him awake. A third resident called 911. Police and EMTs arrived within 5 minutes, finding Bert unresponsive with signs of cardiac arrest. Resuscitation efforts continued for about 10 minutes before he was transported to Elmhurst Hospital Center, where he was pronounced dead. The cause: sudden cardiac arrest precipitated by acute stress in a patient with coronary artery disease. Building CCTV footage, seized by investigators, showed the entire sequence. The 2 men were identified easily. Both had prior misdemeanor records. Prosecutors charged them with second-degree reckless endangerment and criminal trespass, standard charges under New York penal law for actions causing foreseeable harm without intent to kill. The funeral took place quietly at a local church. About 24 people attended, mostly old co-workers and neighbors. His widow, who lived separately after a long estrangement, refused to speak publicly or push for harsher charges. The 2 pranksters each received 3 years probation, community service, and a restraining order, barring contact with the family. It was August 26, 2017, on a narrow, winding road just outside Tagaytay, Philippines. The evening air was thick and humid, carrying the faint scent of nearby pine and smoke from distant fires. That night, a series of thoughtless stunts and prank ideas had already circulated among local teens and amateur filmmakers, setting the stage for a tragedy they should have anticipated. Renz Agapito, 25, worked as a part-time caretaker at a small resort overlooking the ridge and had recently joined a local film collective specializing in prank videos for social media. He had a playful personality, often volunteering for the riskiest roles in their sketches. He sometimes carried a sponsorship from a regional snack brand that encouraged creative content, and his Facebook page had modest but growing engagement. The roads near the resort were steep, narrow, and poorly lit, with minimal shoulders, no guardrails, and frequent hairpin turns, terrain that required careful attention from drivers and anyone near the edge. Locals often warned newcomers about sudden drop-offs and blind corners, but Renz ignored the danger, chasing the viral reaction he hoped would hit online. The technical demands of the setup were simple on paper. Renz would hide behind a tree near the roadside, wearing a white sheet, then jump out as a vehicle approached. 2 friends would film from a parked motorcycle several meters back. The plan relied entirely on precise timing, Renz's ability to retreat quickly, and the expectation that passing drivers would react predictably. That night, the group began filming around 11:40 p.m. Traffic was light, but the incline increased vehicle speed unpredictably. Renz positioned himself behind a tree, sheet draped loosely over his shoulders. The friends filmed, the engine of a passing motorcycle humming softly. Renz ignored the muffled sounds of cars approaching from the distance, assuming he could step aside quickly if needed. A gray SUV came around the bend too fast. Its headlights cut sharply across the road, illuminating Renz for just a fraction of a second. He stepped out, arms raised under the sheet. The driver swerved instinctively, tires scraping the narrow shoulder before overcorrecting. The SUV skidded sideways, striking Renz and throwing him several meters before hitting a concrete barrier. Nearby stall workers heard the metallic crash and rushed toward the sound. Renz was found partially covered by the torn sheet, motionless. His friends ran to him as residents came out from nearby houses. Responders and police from the local precinct arrived minutes later after one of the residents' calls. They found multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and blunt force trauma consistent with high-speed impact. The SUV driver, a woman in her 40s, sustained minor cuts and shock but survived. Investigators later reviewed the friend's phone footage and skid marks to confirm that the prank had directly triggered the crash. The footage showed Renz stepping out just before impact, leaving the driver no time to react. Authorities ruled the case an accident caused by reckless imprudence resulting in homicide. A charge filed against the two surviving members of the film group. They faced both criminal and civil proceedings for contributory negligence. Renz's family held a private funeral in Cavite, attended mostly by relatives and neighbors. It was May 9, 2015, at a small temple in Kyoto. Volunteers were arriving early to set up the annual temple book fair, joking and carrying boxes of donations. Among them, a harmless prank, a thin layer of water spread across an entrance ramp as part of a reflection joke for latecomers, would soon take away a life. Keiko Sato was 74, a part-time librarian known for her meticulous organization and calm demeanor. She had early-stage osteoporosis, making her cautious with stairs and slopes, and she walked with a slight forward lean to protect her spine. She had spent decades cataloging local history books and volunteering at community events, driven by a sense of responsibility rather than adventure. She enjoyed gardening and long walks, but she was conscious of her physical limitations. Despite her prudence, Keiko had a habit of taking small risks to maintain independence, such as carrying crates or reaching higher shelves, trusting her experience over caution. Keiko had no sponsors or external pressures, but she had a personal standard to be reliable. She arrived early each year to help with the book fair setup, carrying boxes of donated books and organizing tables. The temple was known for uneven ramps, small steps, and wet stone surfaces after rain, all hazards she knew well. The prankers, two younger volunteers from a nearby college, had a casual disregard for risk, intending the water film as a light-hearted visual trick rather than a slipping hazard. They assumed everyone would see it and avoid it, but they hadn't accounted for Keiko arriving alone with a crate. On this day, the assignment seemed simple. Transport donations up a gently sloping entrance ramp and place them near the registration table. But the prank made it unusually dangerous. Temple's CCTV later showed Keiko approaching, focused on balancing her load, unaware of the slippery film. The volunteers who had applied the water were chatting near the corner, distracted. No warning signs had been posted, and the thin layer of water blended with the natural shine of the stone. The ramp's incline was modest, but combined with her limited mobility, it created a hazard far greater than any of the pranksters anticipated. Keiko stepped onto the ramp, her hands full of books, her feet placed deliberately. Her weight shifted as she adjusted the crate, and the water film instantly reduced friction. Her right foot slid forward, while her left foot tried to compensate, creating a sudden, unsteady backward tilt. Her crate tumbled against her chest, amplifying the motion. Temple's CCTV captured the motion in clear detail. A pause, a subtle lurch, and then her body collapsing backward onto the stone surface. The impact was immediate. Keiko's head struck the concrete edge of a low step with a heavy thud. The crate scattered books across the ramp, and the film reflected the overhead sunlight, highlighting the sudden, frozen chaos. Volunteers froze in place, some rushing to dial emergency services while others applied first aid. Paramedics arrived quickly, noting multiple fractures and an acute intracranial hemorrhage. She was transported to a nearby hospital, where she succumbed 2 days later, due to complications from fragile bones and blood-thinning medication. The prankers were inconsolable, publicly apologizing and cooperating with temple authorities. The temple canceled the remainder of the book fair and refunded all donations. A memorial reading was held in Keiko's honor, and volunteers established a community safety day focusing on fall prevention for the elderly. Over the next 5 years, a volunteer rota was instituted to escort older visitors during events. Ensuring her death prompted long-term precautionary measures and daily reminders of the dangers of thoughtless pranks. It was August 18, 2017, On a winding stretch of provincial ring road in Lombardy, Italy, cars moved steadily along the otherwise quiet route, unaware that a careless prank, a few reflective cones and a fake hazard sign, had been set up by teenagers hoping to film startled drivers. Marco Rinaldi, 46, had been a professional van driver for over 20 years. He transported perishable goods to the same network of restaurants along the ring road and knew each bend and incline intimately. Married with 2 children, he took pride in his work, rarely speeding and always checking his cargo and vehicle systems before departures. Marco drove a refrigerated van equipped with standard safety features, anti-lock brakes, reinforced cabin, and a dash cam. The cargo area contained temperature-sensitive foods, and sudden braking or swerving risked damaging the load. He had no sponsorship pressures, but there were expectations from clients and a tight schedule. Lateness meant lost contracts or complaints. Despite these pressures, he rarely cut corners, though he sometimes pushed speed limits slightly to stay on time, believing his familiarity with the road compensated for risk. That evening, he was on his routine delivery route, completing the last stops before the weekend. Visibility was limited on the bend where the prank was set up. The teenager's reflective cones caught his headlights at the corner of his vision, and the sudden roadblock prompted him to brake and swerve instinctively. He had no way to know the prank was staged, and no signs warned of the obstruction. In the seconds before the incident, he adjusted the wheel to avoid the cones while maintaining control of the heavy van. The artificial hazard had transformed a familiar, manageable road into an unpredictable trap. Dashcam footage from a pickup ahead captured the first reaction, a sudden stop as the driver saw the cones, tires screeching. Marco swerved to avoid rear-ending the pickup, maneuvering toward the shoulder, but an oncoming lorry emerged from the opposite lane, rounding the bend at speed. The van's evasive motion placed it sideways in the lorry's path. The sequence unfolded in under 5 seconds, each driver reacting to the last, compounding confusion behind them. Witnesses later described the impact. The truck collided with Marco's van on the driver's side, crushing the cabin. Multiple vehicles behind braked and collided in a secondary chain reaction, though none were fatal. Emergency crews arrived quickly after a call from several motorists, using hydraulic cutters to free Marco, but the intrusion into the cabin had caused catastrophic blunt trauma. His body was later examined at the scene, confirming unsurvivable injuries. Investigators reconstructed the scene using dashcam and traffic camera footage combined with witness statements. The teenager's prank was identified as the initial catalyst for the accident. Police noted that the combination of a dimly lit bend and the artificial roadblock created a hazard no skilled driver could fully mitigate. The teenagers faced prosecution for creating a public danger, and local media widely condemned the stunt. Authorities installed additional reflective markers and a speed camera along the bend. He was survived by his wife, Elena, and their 2 children, ages 9 and 12. His funeral was held quietly in his hometown church, attended by relatives, co-workers, and several restaurant owners from his route. It was January 15th, 2016, when 19-year-old Amelia Finch made a decision that would cost her everything. Working part-time at a local coffee shop while studying environmental science, Amelia was known for her adventurous spirit and eagerness to please her friends. That weekend, she joined her college buddies Mason and Rhea at a remote lakeside cabin in northern Minnesota for what was supposed to be a fun winter getaway. Mason, a 20-year-old barista with an impulsive streak, had been documenting increasingly risky winter dares for social media. Amelia had no idea she was being misled into believing the ice was safe when none of them had actually checked it. Rhea, 19 and working retail, was always ready with her camera, eager to capture the next viral moment. The trio had no idea that a midweek warm spell followed by an overnight refreeze had created dangerously deceptive ice conditions on the lake. The challenge seemed simple enough. Walk 25 yards onto the frozen lake to plant a flag while being filmed. Mason joked that the ice was tested and safe, but none of them had actually checked its thickness or brought any safety equipment. No throw ropes, no ice picks, nothing that could help in an emergency. As afternoon shadows grew longer, Amelia stepped confidently onto what appeared to be solid ice near the shoreline. Her winter boots crunched on the surface as Mason and Rhea recorded from the safety of the dock. The first 10 yards felt secure, but then she began hearing hollow sounds beneath her feet. Hairline cracks started appearing around her boots. At roughly 20 yards from shore, near a drainage inlet where the ice was thinnest, disaster struck. A small, dark patch had formed near the inlet. Something ice safety experts later said was a telltale sign of weak spots caused by current flow. No one noticed it in time. The surface suddenly sagged beneath her weight, then gave way completely. Amelia plunged chest deep into the near-freezing water, her body immediately going into shock from the temperature. The icy water was a brutal 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Her heavy winter clothing became waterlogged within seconds, dragging her down. Every attempt to pull herself onto the ice edge only broke off more chunks, widening the hole. Her gloves couldn't grip the slippery surface, and panic set in as the cold began shutting down her motor functions. Mason and Rhea screamed from shore, but couldn't risk walking onto the unstable ice themselves. They threw a branch and an extension cord toward her, but both fell short of the expanding hole. Within 3 minutes, the frigid water had sapped Amelia's strength completely. Her coordination failed, her head began dipping below the surface repeatedly, and she aspirated the icy water. As her friends frantically called 911, Amelia's movements became weaker. The cold had overwhelmed her body's ability to function. She slipped beneath the surface one final time, leaving only bubbles and her knit hat floating in the dark water. Fire and dive teams arrived 45 minutes later, using specialized ice rescue equipment to recover her body from 12 feet of water. The average survival time in 34 degrees Fahrenheit water is less than 10 minutes without flotation or self-rescue gear. By the time rescuers reached the lake, her chances had already been lost to the cold. The medical examiner determined she had drowned due to cold water incapacitation, with the rapid temperature shock preventing any chance of self-rescue. The tragedy prompted the county to install warning signs about ice safety and launch public education campaigns about the dangers of early season ice. Mason and Rhea completed mandatory water safety courses, forever changed by witnessing their friends' final moments. What began as a harmless winter dare had ended in the loss of a promising young life, all because no one understood that ice safety requires more than just appearances. It was August 23, 2017, when 22-year-old Wilder Prescott's overconfidence would prove deadly on a downtown Portland rooftop. Working as a freelance graphic designer, Wilder had spent 3 years practicing parkour around the city's warehouse district. His athletic build and fearless attitude made him popular among urban explorers, but his need to push boundaries would become his downfall. The evening started when Wilder met his roommate and another friend on adjacent apartment building rooftops. His roommate, working in food service, had been challenging Wilder to dangerous stunts for their social media accounts. The third member worked retail and served as their camera operator, eager to capture viral moments. The gap between buildings appeared manageable at 8 feet across, well within Wilder's proven jumping ability. Wilder didn't realize he was being misled by his friend's confidence, believing the jump was far safer than it actually was, and what he didn't know was that their confidence was part of a running prank, an ongoing joke where they exaggerated the safety of stunts to push him into attempts he otherwise might refuse. He'd completed similar distances before, though never at such a dangerous height. 4 stories above concrete pavement left no room for error, but Wilder's competitive nature wouldn't let him back down. Earlier that evening, Wilder had consumed a couple of beers with dinner. While not enough to significantly impair judgment, the alcohol provided false confidence to override natural caution. Building engineers later confirmed the gravel layer was designed for drainage, not traction, a detail that made his run-up more hazardous than anyone realized. The rooftop's surface was covered in loose pea gravel, creating a treacherous footing none of them considered. As darkness settled, Wilder positioned himself for the jump. He measured out a 15-foot running start, believing the distance would provide adequate momentum to clear the gap safely. His friends positioned themselves on the target building, camera ready to document another successful stunt. The fatal sequence began when Wilder started his approach run. Building speed across the gravel surface, he focused on the parapet wall where he would launch into the void. But as he planted his takeoff foot, Disaster struck when shifting loose stones beneath his boot caused instability. The unstable surface dropped his launch angle significantly lower than intended. Instead of the clean, horizontal trajectory needed, Wilder followed a steep downward arc that brought him well short of the target physics had taken control, with no correcting his path mid-flight. His fingertips barely grazed the opposite building's edge before his chest collided violently with the brick facade at the third-floor level. The impact shattered multiple ribs and caused severe internal injuries. But his nightmare was just beginning. The collision sent him rebounding backward into the narrow alley below. During his 40-foot fall, Wilder struck a fire escape railing with devastating force. The impact spun his body around, rotating him head down for the final descent phase. This rotation proved to be the determining factor in his fate. When Wilder struck the concrete alley surface, the head-first impact caused catastrophic skull and spine injuries. The force caused a basilar skull fracture and severe cervical spine dislocation, injuries that are instantly fatal upon impact. No human could survive such trauma. Witnesses immediately called emergency services, but paramedics could only confirm what was apparent. Officers documented the scene and initially classified it as a fatal fall during an unauthorized rooftop stunt. However, investigators later learned that the stunt had been encouraged through an ongoing prank between the friends, where they routinely exaggerated the safety of challenges to push Wilder into attempts he otherwise might refuse. Building management responded by installing higher barriers around rooftop access points. Wilder's roommate faced legal consequences, receiving community service and mandatory counseling for his role in the prank's escalation. The case became a sobering reminder that even seemingly harmless jokes can combine with height, misjudgment, and peer pressure to produce fatal outcomes. It was March 18, 2018, when 20-year-old Noah Sterling's trusting nature would lead her into a deadly trap inside a Chicago high-rise. Working nights as a security guard while saving for nursing school, Noah was known for her responsible demeanor and dedication to helping others. Her compassionate personality made her vulnerable to manipulation by those she considered friends. That night, Noah was off duty when her boyfriend and two friends convinced her to let them into the downtown office building where she worked. The boyfriend, employed at a warehouse, had a history of pushing boundaries for social media content. His friend worked in retail and carried a camera, while the third member held a restaurant position and instigated their reckless adventures. The group claimed they wanted to explore the supposedly haunted upper floors for a ghost hunting video. Noah reluctantly agreed, using her security access to bypass after-hours restrictions she had been drinking earlier, which clouded her judgment about the serious protocol breach. The freight elevator had been out of service for maintenance, with shaft doors secured but not locked. Warning signs marked the area as dangerous, but the group ignored these safety measures, pursuing dramatic footage. The elevator car sat parked at the basement level, leaving a deadly void above. What happened next revealed their cruel plan. One friend deliberately dropped a phone down the elevator shaft, then claimed it was accidental. They pressured Noah to climb down the maintenance ladder to retrieve it, playing on her responsibility as the building's security guard. Noah never realized she was being deliberately tricked into a situation they knew was unsafe. Noah opened the shaft door on the 8th floor and began descending into darkness. The maintenance ladder, uninspected for over 2 years, showed corrosion invisible in dim lighting. Her friends positioned themselves above with phone flashlights, supposedly helping, but actually filming her ordeal. Maintenance records later revealed the ladder hadn't been inspected since 2014, despite state safety codes requiring annual checks. At the 5th floor level, disaster struck when a corroded ladder rung gave way under her weight. The metal, weakened by years of moisture, snapped when she shifted her full body weight onto it. Noah lost her grip and fell backward into the black elevator shaft void. Her 60-foot fall was broken by multiple impacts, with cable guides and support beams protruding from shaft walls. Each collision caused severe spinal and internal trauma. She finally crashed onto the elevator car roof, parked at the basement level. The impact with the solid metal surface caused immediate cardiac arrest and massive internal bleeding. Her friends called emergency services, but specialized equipment needed to safely access the elevator shaft would take precious time. Emergency responders required 35 minutes to reach Noah using high-angle rescue techniques. In high-rise rescues, confined space entry and fall victim recovery can exceed 30 minutes, even with specialized gear, a delay fatal for anyone with blunt force trauma. By the time they extracted her, any resuscitation chance had passed. The medical examiner confirmed instant death upon impact. Investigation revealed the building management's failure to properly maintain the ladder system, leading to significant citations. Her 3 friends faced serious criminal charges, with her boyfriend receiving the harshest sentence for orchestrating the deadly prank. The building implemented security upgrades, including locked elevator shaft access and continuous monitoring. New regulations required regular inspection of emergency ladder systems in commercial buildings citywide. Noah's family used her life insurance to establish a scholarship fund for aspiring nurses, ensuring her dream of helping others would continue through future healthcare workers. What began as a night of supposed fun ended with a young woman's death, proving that even those closest to us can harbor dangerous intentions when social media fame becomes more important than human life. It was July 12, 2015, when 18-year-old Hadley Rivers' desire to fit in would cost her everything at a suburban Phoenix pool party. Fresh out of high school and working part-time at a pet store, Hadley was known for her trusting nature and eagerness to make friends before starting college. Her mild asthma hadn't bothered her in years, so she didn't bring her inhaler to what seemed like an innocent gathering. The party was hosted by classmates she barely knew, but Hadley was desperate to break into the popular crowd. The host's older brother, a college student studying chemistry, convinced the group to film what he called a harmless pool prank. Claiming the water would change colors around swimmers, Hadley believed him, unaware the mixture he prepared was dangerously unstable. Working part-time at a grocery store, he boasted about his chemistry skills and assured everyone the effect would look spectacular on camera. What the group didn't realize was that their amateur chemist was mixing industrial cleaning agents with pool chlorine, creating a dangerous combination he had never tested. The chemicals sat in unmarked containers near the pool deck with minimal safety information. Hadley had been swimming in the shallow end when the fatal experiment began. The summer heat was intense with little wind to disperse gases. The pool's design created a natural basin where heavier-than-air chemicals could settle around the water's surface. The older brother poured granular calcium hypochlorite into the water near the steps where Hadley was relaxing. Within minutes, he poured in a common muriatic acid used for pool pH adjustment, unaware that mixing it directly with calcium hypochlorite releases chlorine gas almost instantly. The reaction was immediate and deadly, producing a yellow-green cloud of chlorine gas rising from the water. Because chlorine is heavier than air, it accumulated at the waterline, creating an invisible cloud no higher than a few feet, exactly where Hadley was breathing, and the toxic gas settled around the pool area where Hadley remained. She began coughing violently as chlorine gas attacked her respiratory system, her eyes turning red from chemical irritation. Her dormant asthma suddenly became life-threatening as her airways began constricting. Hadley attempted to exit via the steps, but the gas cloud lingered, forcing her to continue breathing toxic fumes. Her skin showed visible irritation while her breathing became increasingly labored. Other guests finally realized something was wrong when Hadley's speech became broken and desperate. The group moved Hadley to an open area and flushed her eyes, but her condition worsened rapidly as severe bronchospasm set in. Emergency technicians arrived within minutes, providing oxygen and bronchodilators, yet her breathing continued to deteriorate. Foamy sputum developed during transport, a sign of acute lung injury. At the hospital, imaging confirmed diffuse pulmonary edema from chlorine inhalation. Despite high-flow oxygen and mechanical ventilation, she progressed to acute respiratory distress syndrome with refractory hypoxemia. Hadley was pronounced dead in the early morning hours, her life cut short by a preventable chemical accident disguised as a harmless prank. Investigators classified the incident as a fatal chemical exposure during unauthorized experimentation, later confirming the color-changing pool prank had been carried out with no understanding of the risks. The homeowner received citations, and the brother was ordered to complete hazardous materials safety training. Hadley's family created safety programs in her memory, and the pool was permanently closed. It was September 14th, 2016, when 21-year-old Brooks Coleman's competitive nature would lead him to his death at a Denver construction site. Working as an apprentice electrician, Brooks was known for his fearless attitude and willingness to accept any dare. His construction experience had made him overconfident about workplace hazards, often bending safety rules when supervisors weren't around. That evening, Brooks met up with two co-workers who had been filming dangerous workplace stunts during off hours. Kyle, a 21-year-old laborer's helper with a reputation for pranks, had convinced Brooks to return to their job site after hours. Danny, a 20-year-old apprentice carpenter, reluctantly agreed to film their latest stunt. The high-rise commercial building had reached 12 stories, with upper floors lacking exterior walls and safety barriers. The skeletal steel framework created a deadly maze of open bays, with 8-inch wide I-beams spanning dangerous voids above the concrete foundation far below. Brooks had previously walked along similar beams at ground level, but never at such a lethal height without fall protection. The group had no harnesses, no lifelines, and no safety nets. Variable winds moved through the open structure, carrying debris that could affect the footing. Kyle's plan involved a cruel prank designed to capture Brooks' startled reaction. Brooks had no idea the stunt was a setup and that he was being tricked into walking the beam without knowing a scare was planned. As Brooks would step onto a 10th-floor beam, Kyle would sound an air horn from behind to shock him. None considered how a sudden loud noise might affect balance while walking 120 feet above concrete. Workers later said the prank was meant as a startle clip for social media, a trend circulating in construction meme circles at the time. As evening light faded, Brooks climbed to the designated floor and approached the steel beam. He tested his footing carefully, aware that dust could create slippery conditions. The camera was positioned to capture his planned crossing. Brooks mounted the beam and began shifting his weight forward, concentrating on maintaining balance. At that critical moment, Kyle discharged the air horn from directly behind him. The sudden blast caused Brooks to flinch involuntarily, his trailing foot slipping on the dusty surface. His center of mass shifted beyond the beam's edge as he attempted to recover balance. Brooks tried to step wide to regain stability, but the open bay offered no handholds. Gravity took control as he fell through the skeletal framework. During his 120-foot descent, Brooks struck a floor edge and scaffolding equipment, causing severe fractures and massive internal injuries. Each impact altered his trajectory and increased trauma during the fall. The final impact occurred when Brooks struck the concrete foundation slab. The force caused catastrophic head trauma and chest compression injuries. His pulse was absent when his friends reached him. Kyle and Danny frantically called emergency services, but faced delays accessing ground level because site gates were locked. With site gates padlocked for the night, the pair were forced to flag down a passing security patrol to unlock the perimeter, a delay that kept medics from reaching Brooks for nearly 10 minutes. Paramedics initiated resuscitative efforts, but Brooks had sustained injuries incompatible with life. The medical examiner confirmed death resulted from multiple blunt force trauma. The investigation revealed unauthorized site access and the absence of fall protection. The contractor immediately increased perimeter security and implemented zero-tolerance policies regarding pranks around elevated work areas. Kyle faced criminal charges, including trespass and reckless endangerment, for orchestrating the deadly prank. Donnie provided statements to investigators and later participated in safety outreach programs. Brooks' death sparked industry discussions about startle hazards at construction sites, transforming a senseless tragedy into a lesson that would protect future workers from similar fates. It was November 3rd, 2017, when 19-year-old Jennifer Paulson, passion for urban photography, would lead her into a deadly trap at an abandoned Detroit factory. Working part-time at a bookstore while studying photography, Jennifer was known for her artistic eye and love of documenting urban decay. She had always explored during daylight hours and never alone until this fateful night. Jennifer had joined an online urban exploration group that challenged members to spend entire nights in dangerous abandoned locations, filming the experience for social media. The peer pressure pushed her beyond her usual safety boundaries. That evening, Jennifer met up with Marco, a 21-year-old warehouse picker who ran a prank channel, and Tia, a 20-year-old art student easily influenced by group dynamics. They had chosen the abandoned factory specifically for its reputation as one of the city's most structurally unsound buildings. City inspection records later showed the structure had been red-tagged years earlier for severe roof leaks and termite damage. Warnings long ignored by trespassers. The factory had been closed for 15 years, with floors severely weakened by water damage and missing floorboards. The third floor showed visible deterioration, with soft spots and warning signs noting structural instability. Marco had planned a jump scare to capture Jennifer's reaction, positioning a hidden sheet of metal nearby to drop while she photographed. Jennifer had no idea he was setting up a prank, or that he'd led her onto one of the most unstable areas of the floor. As midnight approached, Jennifer set up her tripod near a large window. Marco positioned himself with the metal sheet while Tia filmed from the doorway, ready to document what they expected would be harmless. Marco released the sheet metal, creating a thunderous crash. Jennifer startled violently and stepped backward onto water-damaged plywood concealing rotted floor joists beneath. The panel fractured completely. Jennifer fell through to the second floor, but the impact caused another section of compromised flooring to give way, sending her plummeting to ground level in a cascade of splintered wood and debris. During her descent, Jennifer struck multiple splintered joists and metal debris, sustaining severe spinal fractures and internal injuries. A protruding piece of rebar caused a deep abdominal wound, adding to her trauma. She landed on broken concrete and rusted equipment. The impact caused significant bleeding and left her completely paralyzed below the waist, trapped in the cold, dark building with life-threatening injuries. Inside the steel-reinforced structure, cell signals barely registered. Emergency calls dropped repeatedly, forcing them to run outside before contact could be made. They applied pressure to her wounds using clothing and ran to find an exterior door to guide emergency responders. Emergency access was delayed by the building's size and debris blocking entry points. Responders eventually reached Jennifer using specialized equipment, but her vital signs had deteriorated rapidly due to blood loss and cold exposure. Jennifer was pronounced dead at the scene after unsuccessful resuscitation attempts. The medical examiner cited multiple blunt force injuries with hemorrhage and exposure as contributing factors. The property owner secured building entries and coordinated with officials to increase patrols around abandoned structures. Marco faced charges for trespass and reckless conduct tied to his staged prank. A campus exhibition of Jennifer's work included safety briefings for student photographers about structural hazards. When exploring abandoned locations, her death became a chilling reminder that urban exploration demands respect for decaying structures and that chasing social media content can exact the ultimate price. It was October 9th, 2017, in Tempe, Arizona. Inside one rental home on South Mill Avenue, the phone's tiny recording indicator blinked faintly in the dark hallway. The larger LED panel beside it was switched off to keep the scene pitch black for the jump scare. He had rehearsed the jump twice, whispering into the lens with quiet anticipation. Daniel Mercer, 22, was a communications major in his senior year at ASU. He lived with 2 roommates and spent weekends editing short comedy clips for a YouTube channel he'd started in high school. His content leaned toward harmless slapstick, staged scares, fake arguments, and mild dares. The channel's growth had stalled, drawing pressure from peers who joked that his videos were stuck at 400 views. Friends described him as good-natured and persistent, always with a camera in hand. The prank series he had planned for October was meant to push his content slightly further. Halloween scare videos, as he called them. Their rental home was a narrow, one-story unit with thin drywall and laminate floors. Daniel's gear consisted of a tripod-mounted phone, a small LED panel, and a wireless mic clipped to his hoodie. His roommate, Alex Whitmore, 23, worked part-time at a car shop and often came home late. Alex had mentioned weeks earlier that he purchased a handgun after a nearby break-in. He usually kept it in his backpack during the day, but had since gotten into the habit of slipping it into a belt holster before unlocking the door at night. Daniel brushed it off, assuming the weapon stayed unloaded or stored away. That night, he texted another friend that he planned to scare the hell out of Alex for the next upload. The setup was simple. Daniel would wait in the hallway between the kitchen and bedrooms, hidden behind the half-open pantry door. The phone camera, facing the corridor, had a clear shot of where Alex would walk in. The recording started at 12:34 a.m., 8 minutes of silence, except for Daniel's quiet breathing. He adjusted the ski mask and crouched, phone mic barely picking up the creak of the door as he leaned forward. At 12:42 a.m., the front door opened. From the shadowed corner, Daniel lunged forward, shouting to scare Alex. The figure at the door fired almost instantly, mistaking him for a burglar. The camera on the tripod continued recording. In the corner of the frame, Daniel's body twitched once, then went still. Blood spread rapidly across the tile, pooling against the baseboard within half a minute. Moments later, Alex dropped his backpack, the impact echoing through the hallway. He stumbled forward, gun still in hand, his breathing sharp and uneven. Realizing who was on the floor, he froze, then fumbled for his phone. His voice cracked as he called emergency services, repeating Daniel's name again and again. At 12:43 a.m., the 911 operator logged a report of an accidental shooting during suspected break-in. When police arrived 7 minutes later, they found Daniel unresponsive with a single gunshot wound to the chest. The investigation concluded that the Glock 19 used in the shooting was legally owned and loaded with hollow point rounds. Gunshot residue tests confirmed a close-range discharge, consistent with roughly 1 to 3 feet, matching the estimated gap between Daniel's position in the hallway and the front doorway at the moment he lunged. No evidence suggested intent. Detectives determined the lighting and mask made immediate recognition impossible. The phone recording, intact, was retrieved as part of the case file. Authorities ruled the shooting accidental. No charges were filed after review by the county attorney's office, though the Mercer family sought civil action against Alex Whitmore for negligence. Friends described him as withdrawn afterward, avoiding calls and dropping out before the end of the semester. August 30th, 2015, on the Mendocino coast of Northern California. The parking lot at the Point Arena turnout was almost empty, save for a single silver sedan facing the water. Beyond the fence, the bluffs dropped steeply to a narrow stretch of jagged rock where waves struck in slow, rhythmic bursts. Lydia Harper, 25, was an elementary school teacher from Sacramento, known among her colleagues for her warmth and even temper. She'd started teaching second grade 2 years earlier and was about to begin the fall semester. She had been dating Evan Clark, 26, for 3 years. They shared a modest apartment near the freeway and occasionally filmed short couple challenges, mostly for their friends' amusement. The weekend trip to the coast had been Evan's idea, a brief escape before work resumed. Evan worked as a junior contractor for a construction firm in Elk Grove. The job had been wearing on him, and he joked about needing to do something fun for once. He had recently watched a viral video of a man pretending to propose as a prank, which went mildly viral among his peers. That weekend, he brought along a small ring box with a plastic ring inside and planned to film Lydia's shocked reaction using his phone. The spot near Point Arena, with its open view of the sea, seemed ideal. They arrived at the turnout just after 6 p.m. The fog was thickening, leaving a thin layer of condensation across the grass and gravel. The couple walked beyond the wooden fence to a flat area of exposed earth about 10 feet from the edge. Evan set his phone on record and propped it against his backpack, adjusting it until the frame showed both of them with the ocean behind. Lydia, unaware, stood watching the waves. The wind had begun to pick up slightly, dragging fine mist through the air. From the recording later recovered by investigators, the moment seemed casual. Laughter, the faint sound of surf, and the crackle of wind over the microphone. Evan dropped to one knee with exaggerated seriousness, holding out the small box. Lydia gasped, clutching her face with both hands, her laugh audible. She took a step back instinctively, shaking her head as if to scold him. The heel of her right shoe caught a patch of loose gravel near the edge. In the footage, her balance faltered, Her arms flailed, and a sudden sharp inhale cut through the audio. Evan lunged forward, shouting her name. The sound of his shoes scraping the ground could be heard, followed by a choked cry, filling the remaining seconds. The recording showed him leaning forward from about 3 feet behind her, stopping short of the cliff edge, shouting into the white void. He slipped once, catching himself on his knees, and then the video cut off as he reached for the phone. Investigators later determined he attempted to climb down the unstable slope, sliding roughly 15 feet before stopping due to the terrain and just calling for help instead. He suffered abrasions to his arms and legs and was treated for mild hypothermia that night. Search teams began work at dawn. Visibility was poor, but a Coast Guard helicopter eventually located Lydia Harper's body on a rocky ledge about 40 feet below the lookout. The coroner determined she had died instantly from blunt force trauma to the head and chest. The death was ruled accidental. Evan Clark was not charged, though he withdrew from social circles and resigned from his job within the year. The bluff was later fenced and posted with additional signage warning of unstable footing and no access beyond the barrier. It was October 29, 2018, in Portland, Oregon. A low-pressure system had settled over the Willamette Valley that evening. Inside the Walsh family's 2-story home in the Montevilla neighborhood, lights dimmed occasionally as thunder rolled overhead, but the power stayed on. The house was quiet except for the sound of rain and the muffled laughter of 2 siblings waiting out the storm. Jeremy Walsh was 17, a high school senior who liked to turn dull moments into jokes. He played varsity baseball, worked part-time at a grocery store, and planned to study graphic design after graduation. His sense of humor was impulsive, often leaning toward small pranks. Nothing cruel, but sometimes poorly timed. Family described him as easygoing, restless, and constantly chasing reactions. His parents, both healthcare workers, were working late shifts that night. The Walsh family had adopted Rex, a 90-pound German shepherd, from a rescue group that spring. The dog had been described as protective, but trainable, with a history of agitation toward unfamiliar people and erratic behavior during loud noises. Jeremy's father had installed indoor cameras to monitor Rex's behavior while they were away. The cameras used infrared sensors and stored footage on a cloud server. On stormy nights, the dog tended to pace the hallways or bark at sudden sounds, something Jeremy found amusing rather than concerning. That evening, the rain intensified, lightning flickering through the living room windows and briefly illuminating the walls. Jeremy decided to play a Halloween-themed prank on his younger sister, Emily, who was 13. He found an old cracked plastic mask from a previous year's costume and a black hoodie from his baseball bag. Ignoring Rex's nervous pacing, Jeremy whispered to his sister from the hallway, then disappeared into the shadows, planning to jump out when she turned the corner. Emily hid under a blanket on the couch, phone light trembling in her hand. The dog's tension built gradually, triggered by the series of thunder that rolled through the house. The home security footage later reviewed by investigators showed Rex pacing, ears pinned, eyes fixed toward the hallway. When a louder clap shook the windows, his body stiffened, a typical fear response that often preceded defensive behavior in anxious dogs. Jeremy moved slowly toward the living room. When he reached the doorway, he crouched, mask glinting faintly in the dim light. The next instant, the camera recorded the rapid burst of movement, Rex lunging with full force. The sound of claws scraping on laminate flooring was followed by a heavy impact and Jeremy's startled cry. The first bite landed on Jeremy's left forearm, tearing through skin and muscle. He stumbled backward, falling onto the floor as the dog held on, shaking its head violently. The mask fell off and rolled toward the couch. Jeremy tried to push Rex away with his free hand, leaving deep scratches along his wrist. The room filled with the sound of barking, wet thuds, and the muffled sobbing of his sister. Blood splattered against the floor, visible in the grainy camera feed as dark streaks. The struggle lasted 47 seconds before Jeremy stopped moving. The dog released its grip, pacing in small circles, whining softly before retreating toward the kitchen. Emily fled the house barefoot into the rain, screaming for help. Paramedics reached the home 8 minutes after a 911 call from their neighbor. Jeremy was found near the living room entrance, with massive blood loss from a severed brachial artery. Attempts at resuscitation failed. His parents returned from the hospital that night to find the living room sealed with tape. Jeremy's death was ruled accidental. Animal control officers secured Rex without incident. The dog's prior behavioral notes confirmed 2 previous warnings for unprovoked aggression. The family requested euthanasia rather than relocation. His parents couldn't bring themselves to re-enter the house for weeks, staying instead with a relative. The Walshes later sold the house quietly the following spring and moved across town. It was July 3rd, 2016, in Austin, Texas. In a small suburban garage, a camera light blinked red. The space smelled faintly of motor oil and sweat, the walls lined with storage bins and old Halloween props. Tyler Brooks had been filming there for months, chasing a kind of low-budget fame that never seemed to arrive. Tyler, 20, was a communications major at Austin Community College and the self-described comedian of his small friend group. He ran a YouTube channel called Scarcely, known for crude humor, fake challenges, and edited skits mocking viral internet trends. Despite the lack of traction, he treated it seriously, convinced that persistence mattered more than views. He balanced part-time warehouse shifts with late-night editing sessions, cutting footage on an aging laptop while watching commentary channels he hoped to one day join. His humor often leaned into self-endangerment, fake electrocutions, pepper spray dares, and one video where he pretended to pass out while live streaming. The setup that day was meant to mock internet hoaxes about viral self-harm challenges. The gag would involve Tyler pretending to hang himself mid-video, only to cut to him laughing seconds later. For safety, he'd borrowed a nylon climbing harness from a friend who used it for rock gym sessions, clipping it to a steel beam that ran across the ceiling. He tied a separate length of yellow nylon rope into a noose-style loop purely for appearance. The plan was to balance on a stool, kick it away for visual effect, then let the harness support his weight from a slack point just below the rope. It was a crude rig, improvised, untested, and meant only for a few seconds of filming. Tyler began recording around 2:13 p.m. The recovered footage, later analyzed by police, showed him positioning the camera at chest height, centering himself in the frame beneath the beam. He slipped the noose over his neck and adjusted the angle of the rope for dramatic effect. Sweat glistened on his forehead as he pulled at the harness clip, unaware it had rotated slightly against the beam, leaving only partial contact with the anchor point. His friends were due to arrive at 3. At 2:21 p.m., Tyler stepped onto the stool. He faced the camera, gave a mock salute, and kicked the stool aside. The sound of the metal clip failing came half a second later. A sharp, metallic snap, followed by a deep, choking thud. The harness carabiner had twisted free under tension, leaving the rope loop to cinch tight around his throat. His body jerked violently as his legs scraped against the concrete floor. The camera microphone picked up guttural choking noises and erratic movement. His arms flailed upward once, striking the tripod hard enough to jostle the frame. Then came only the scrape of shoes against the floor and a series of shallow, gurgling breaths. For 42 seconds, the motion continued, desperate, disorganized, and slowing. Then everything went still. The frame stayed fixed on his body, swaying gently beneath the beam. The camera's clock kept counting silently as minutes passed. At 2:58 p.m., muffled voices came from outside, his friends returning from the store. The garage door opened, flooding the space with daylight, and their screams filled the audio. One of them rushed to cut him down, while another's voice, shaking, could be heard calling emergency services. Police arrived within 10 minutes. Emergency responders pronounced Tyler Brooks dead at the scene from ligature asphyxiation. Investigators examined the harness and determined that the clip had not been properly secured through both loops of the beam anchor. There were no signs of intent beyond the prank setup, confirmed by the footage and the script notes found on his laptop. The death was ruled accidental. His parents removed his channel within days, quietly deleting every video. They donated his camera and tripod to a local film school that year. It was February 15th, 2017, in Cincinnati, Ohio. The morning began quietly inside a mid-rise office building. On the fourth floor, a routine departmental meeting was in progress. It was an ordinary weekday discussion, without anyone expecting what would happen next. Mark Benton, 28, worked as a sales assistant. He had joined the company 3 years earlier after leaving community college. And though not the most focused employee, he was well liked. His humor broke up the monotony of long workdays, office pranks, inside jokes, and harmless ribbing. He wasn't malicious, just impulsive, and often underestimated how seriously others took rules. The building itself was old, but well maintained, equipped with manual pull alarms near each stairwell and a dated but functioning sprinkler system. That morning, the atmosphere in the office had been dull. Some staff were half joking about the long meeting schedule, and Mark, restless as usual, made an offhand comment about how easily the fire alarm could liven things up. Several co-workers laughed it off, assuming he was joking. But 10 minutes later, during a lull in conversation, he quietly stepped into the hallway, saying he was going to refill his coffee. The meeting continued as he lingered near the door. According to his later statement to police, the impulse hit him without much thought. He reached toward the alarm pull beside the stairwell, curious what would happen. The building's last fire alarm had been 6 years earlier, so most employees had never heard it in full volume. Mark looked over his shoulder, then pulled the lever. The alarm blared instantly, shrill, mechanical, deafening in the narrow corridor. Inside the conference room, startled employees leapt from their seats. Sandra Perez, the operations manager leading the meeting, shouted for everyone to evacuate, believing it was real. Witnesses later described the confusion: chairs toppling, coffee spilling, and papers scattering as the group surged toward the stairwell. Near the stairwell entrance stood Henry Lawson, 61, the building's janitor and a former Army mechanic. He had been waxing the floors just minutes before, his caution sign still standing nearby. The noise startled him. One witness recalled seeing him grab his chest and lean against the wall. As the crowd pressed past, someone's shoulder clipped him, throwing off his balance on the slick tile. Multiple witnesses said they saw him twist sideways before disappearing from view. He fell 2 flights, striking the steel handrail on the way down before hitting the concrete landing head first. The alarm continued blaring until Sandra reached the control panel and silenced it. When employees reached the bottom of the stairwell, Henry was motionless, blood pooling beneath his head. One staff member attempted CPR, while another called 911. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, but declared him dead at the scene from severe cranial trauma. Mark remained frozen near the hallway corner when police arrived. In his statement, he said he pulled the alarm as a joke to break the tension and didn't realize the repercussions. The following week, the company issued a statement calling the event a preventable tragedy resulting from reckless behavior. Authorities and local prosecutors reviewed witness accounts and concluded that Henry's death resulted from the false alarm and ensuing panic. Mark Benton was charged with negligent manslaughter and accepted a plea deal for 2 years in state custody. It was April 9th, 2016, in Raleigh, North Carolina. A humid spring night hung over the North Carolina State University campus. Laughter and music drifted from one of the older fraternity houses. The air was heavy with beer, sweat, and a restless energy that always built before something went too far. Chris Tanner Wells was 20, a sophomore majoring in kinesiology with dreams of becoming a physical therapist. He was well-liked, athletic but mild-mannered, the kind of guy who volunteered for everything and rarely said no. Joining a fraternity was part of his effort to fit in, to find the same brotherhood his father had once spoken about from his college years. The fraternity had recently been placed on probation for noise violations, and its leadership wanted to keep traditions low-key. But the newer members, eager to impress, planned a series of harmless pranks that night. The idea came from a viral clip circulating online where someone was wrapped in a blanket and dragged across a gym floor. The fraternity's second-floor hallway had tile floors that reflected the yellow glow of ceiling lights, ending abruptly at a concrete stairwell landing. Tanner had brought his old blue sleeping bag for the overnight event. He didn't realize that while he was talking with another member, someone had already laid the sleeping bag out and tied a rope to it, planning to jump scare him by yanking it down the hallway once he got in. The rope they used was a frayed nylon cord used for towing lawn equipment. Red plastic cups and a half-empty cooler sat nearby, leftovers from earlier drinking games. Though no one was heavily intoxicated. At around 10:40 p.m., Tanner climbed into the sleeping bag, laughing as they zipped it shut around his shoulders, leaving only a small gap near his face for air. 2 pledges tied the rope to the end of the bag, double-looped for security, while the others gathered at the opposite end of the hall. The plan was to race from one end to the other and stop before the stairwell. Someone yelled a countdown, and the group took off running, dragging the bag behind them as Tanner's muffled voice could be heard screaming and laughing through the fabric. At first, everything went as expected. Sliding sounds, laughter, and the echo of sneakers on tile. But as the runners picked up speed, the hallway's waxed surface reduced friction more than they anticipated. One of the runners lost grip of the rope. The sleeping bag, still moving, slid freely toward the stairwell. The others lunged after it, their shoes slipping uselessly against the slick floor. The bag hit the concrete wall beside the stairwell with a sharp, heavy crack. The sound cut through the laughter instantly. When they unzipped the bag, Tanner was motionless, his head tilted unnaturally to the side. Attempts at CPR were panicked and uncoordinated, and they eventually called for help minutes after the impact. Campus police arrived within 8 minutes. Paramedics confirmed Tanner's death at the scene, citing a cervical fracture at the C2 vertebra, consistent with blunt force trauma to the neck. The medical examiner later determined the injury occurred instantly upon impact. The university expelled the group permanently, and 5 fraternity members were charged with reckless endangerment and furnishing alcohol to minors. Tanner Wells's parents requested privacy and declined interviews. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.